Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi everyone, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. This is our week of the Satipatthana, one of the earlier teachings of Shakyamuni. Of course, we pursue these earlier teachings from the standpoint of the Lotus Sutra and our understandings of immediate perfect enlightenment, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. We instantiate that entirety of teachings, the Dharma, if you will, through our recitations and our singing of the culminating teachings of Shakyamuni, the Myoho Renge Kyo, the Lotus Sutra. Within it, as a container of all the teachings, the culmination of the teachings, the ultimate teaching of attaining our Buddha mind here and now. Of course, earlier teachings provided ancient peoples with the tools to start to recognize how their mind works in outside of their body, that their mind is not in the body, that the body is a vehicle, a machine, if you will, to provide in this manifested environment, this samsara, this constructed, conditioned existence, to look through all of the myriad energies and amalgams and all the stuff that in its inertia and momentum creates a me and a you and all of this, right? That we're intimately, constantly searching to hang on to. We still have the original impetus to perceive everything as its true nature. In other words, the entirety of phenomena, from distant stars and gases to personal thoughts and identifications, we can witness that process from an unencumbered, unconditioned, unattached mind, Buddha. And by doing that, all of our little trouble, well, they seem little from there, but they can mean overwhelming sufferings and anxieties and stresses of life, because we whittle life down to just what you and I perceive. Even though we don't agree on everything we perceive, boy, our perception is everything. That's the human condition, right? That's samsara. Still having problems with my tongue, so I apologize if I slur more than usual anyway. So early on, the teachings, as I keep repeating, were very much about just witnessing that play inside one's mind, that our mind was really the contributor to our pains, and not some mysterious forces, not something that we're born with, right? We still talk like that. I was born this way. I was raised this way. No, you were, from the moment energies started to converge to perceive, to create something in order to service that curiosity, before you even entered the womb, these were your tendencies and conditions. Your characteristics are formed from those tendencies and conditions. Well, that's very hard to explain to somebody who isn't aware of how powerful a tool the mind is, right? So early teachings were all about investigating that and getting the students at that time to just get an inkling of how monumentally influential the mind is to the experience of what we would call reality, but as you and I know, this reality is a provisional thing also. It is samsara. It is a construct, not unlike the movie The Matrix. It's a program that exists for you to appreciate and perceive the program. That they don't talk about that so much in The Matrix, not directly anyway, but it's built on the ideas of Buddhism. That our liberated consciousness, our consciousness non-attached to that, and this is actually the biggest failing of the Matrix, is that by getting out of the Matrix, they get into this really horrible position of what they call humanity, which I would argue is far more the Matrix than the Matrix. It's more suffering and anxiety of humanity. It's samsara itself without imagination, which is the Matrix in the movie. But still, there are these ideas in the movie that I can pick out and go, there's a consonance with some ideas in Buddhism there. They just go deeper into the worlds, the six lower worlds, rather than up into the higher worlds, bodhisattva and Buddhahood. They don't even look at that, right? So don't make the mistake of thinking that Matrix is a movie about Buddhism. There are some interesting thought experiments in the Matrix that resemble aspects of Buddhism, but not Buddhism. So please don't let me confuse you there. At any rate, we will continue with the Satipatthana as Shakyamuni is, as he teaches, a lot of repetition. Remember, this is all oral teachings. So you learn them by repeating them, reciting them. That inculcated the ideas repeatedly in your mind, like times tables when you were a kid, right? Or the alphabet. I've said this before. You learn with this singing, kind of repetitive nature. And then at some point, even as old as we are, as I am certainly, I still remember A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? It's not even an effort to remember it because it was so droned into my consciousness that I can repeat it at will, right? This is how Buddhism spread and how the Buddhism teachings were kept clear. There were a lot of variations, to be sure. He taught the same sermon for 8-10 years at a time. So he would himself, Shakyamuni, get bored of repeating the same things. He was certain to have his teaching, his sermon, repeated exactly the same for this oral tradition. But at the same time, he spoke individually to the people he encountered on that particular day, that particular month, that particular geography, wherever he was. So there were more different storytellings and so forth. In the verse section, though, we can be assured those were constantly the same, because that was the root sermon, right? And it appears throughout the commentaries around it. This is why, as we get translations going from different languages to different cultures and so on and so forth, we have, and it may be confusing to the initial student, for instance, Kumarajiva, an Indian scholar of around, I'm testing my memory here, but I think around the 3rd or 4th century, was translating Lotus Sutra chapters. And he had several chapters that some groupings, not canons, but for some sects or some groups of Buddhist teachings and learning, monks would would qualify as belonging to the Lotus Sutra. Some just didn't fit. Others had less chapters in them than it seemed like they missed certain sermons or teachings. And so Kumarajiva, as you might read, had several translations to work from to then create a master translation, and then to translate that master into Chinese as the teachings were moving into China. And so that oral tradition wasn't suited for going to different languages with different ways of communicating. It had to be written down in order for it to continue to spread, right? So Kumarajiva, you would read, would have several, some had 27 chapters, some 28, some had chapters that he eschewed in favor of others that seemed much more consonant with the order of the teachings in the Lotus Sutra. So the Lotus Sutra, like many sutras, is a construction of chapters that are parts of the same lesson. And from the oral tradition, you could tell from the verse sections alone what teachings made sense. I teach this, and then this builds on that, and this builds on that, blah, 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 and you can put together the entire sermon in chapters with its attendant stories, analogies, so on and so forth, right? So that's not to say that there ultimately is out there a version of the Lotus Sutra that's completely different. That's not the case. The case is that the constant scholarship and translation and documentation eventually of Buddhism was very, very seriously undertaken, and in a way ordered as it would have been taught by Shakyamuni himself. So all of that is to send us back into this so I can stop yapping and get back into this early teaching, which is fascinating, if only for its basics of understanding, for a lot of understanding that you and I would take for granted being practitioners of the Lotus Sutra. We understand where this is headed. These people didn't understand where this was headed. That's why they had to learn this first. Right? You can't write a novel until you learn the alphabet, or spelling, or grammar, so on and so forth, right? It gets more and more involved. Basically teaching the same thing, but from the aspect of how much capacity and knowledge we have at the time. So now we're getting into reflections on the modes of materiality, elements, dhatu. And so he continues, and further, O monks, O bhikkhus, a monk reflects on just this body according as it is placed or disposed by way of the modes of materiality, thinking thus: there are in this body the mode of solidity, the mode of cohesion, the mode of caloricity, and the mode of oscillation. Here are aspects of the body that normal folk, ignorant folk, if you would say, in terms of Buddhism, ignorant from the perspective of Buddhism, because they haven't studied Buddhism. This, therefore, is a different new way for you to understand the body, right? So far, this has been about the body, internal, external. Remember, as far as our understanding goes, external to the body does not mean the air, this computer, this video camera, this stuff. That's not what's meant by external body. It's not external to the body, it's external body. What does that really mean? Again, these words are early attempts at getting the monks to understand that external body is the manufacture the conditions, the tendencies and conditions of the energies that inculcate into or manifest this thing, this phenomena that we call body. So there's internal body, fingers, hand, organs, viscera. We've talked about that, right? But also understand in the same moment as you discuss that inner body, that it is of an external body. In other words, the forces that combine to make it in the first place. Start expanding your experience, your mind of cognizance of this body, that it is a manufactured thing for the purpose of experience, the mind of experience, right? So we keep going with this theme, and now we're telling the monks that this body has these different aspects to it, these different modes of materiality. That's an interesting choice of words. I'm curious to see how original Prakrit language would define this. The English is modes of materiality. That may be quite sufficient. But still, I'd wonder. So by just knowledge of study and experience, I'm going to tell you modes of materiality are about the way in which this phenomenal samsaric materiality comes to be. And it comes to be in different ways, right? There are different channels of energy that come together to construct what we call a body. It's not just what we dress up in the mirror. We know there's a lot of stuff going on inside, right? And we're going to talk about the cemetery analogy some more. So, there are modes, there are aspects of the body that are solid. They're solid because there's a mode of materiality that's cohesion. In other words, you don't randomly see arms coming out of your butt, right? The mode of caloricity, this is our whole process of burning up energy by fuel, right? Feed, burn up, make energy, and then cast away, through feces, urine, so on and so forth, what we no longer use for energy. Energy, this, not energy of kinetics and momentum, but more the energy of heat and conversion into action and motivation of the, not motivation, but motivation of the body, right? And the mode of oscillation. That's an interesting one, oscillation. I wonder what the Indian concept of that would be. But simply that there's constantly movement, what we might call vibration, right? Oscillation implies a frequency, waves. There's something, energy, moving through this solidity and cohesion, that, and caloricity, heat, energy, that there's a conversion going on in this machine, right? O bhikkhus, in whatever manner a clever cow butcher or a cow butcher's apprentice, having slaughtered a cow and divided it by way of proportions, should, by sitting at the junction of a four-crossed road in the same manner, a bhikkhu reflects on just this body, according as it is placed or disposed by way of the modes of materiality, thinking thus: there are in this body the mode of solidity, the mode of cohesion, the mode of caloricity, and the mode of oscillation. Thus he lives contemplating the body and the body internal, the body external, the body internal and external, and clings not to naught in this world. Thus, O bhikkhus, a bhikkhu lives contemplating the body in the body. So, what he's talking about there is like a butcher. If we were to look at this thing, body of a human, we would similarly find parts like a butcher, that have different distinct modalities. Here is what cohesion looks like, the tissues of cohesion, the solidity of bone and muscle mass, and the cohesion, the connecting tissues, and he already talked about fat dissolved, saliva, mucus, synovic fluid, urine. And now he's talking about the modes of oscillation, certainly moving the colon and the mesentery around would seem very fluid, right? And moving contractions of muscles and letting go. So a butcher sees the insides, the workings of the body, if you will. So he's trying to get these monks to think about, their body, again, isn't just a reflection in a mirror. There's a lot of stuff going on in it, right? And it's all material, manifestation of energy. So the first contemplation on the cemetery, here we go. And further, O bhikkhus, if a bhikkhu in whatever way sees a body dead, 1, 2, or 3 days, swollen, blue, and festering, thrown into the charnel ground, or the carnal ground, he thinks of his own body thus, quote, this body of mine too is of the same nature as that body, is going to be like that body, and has not passed the condition of becoming like that body. Now that's a very important statement as a Myoho Renge Kyo, as a Lotus Sutra practitioner, Lotus Sutra Buddhist. This is all about understanding the impermanence and the conditioned making of what we call a self, an I. See, we're still talking about early on here that there is no I or self. That's a manufactured, conditioned thing. Manufactured by what? Or you might say by who, but there is no who. There's a process at work here, a life process. And this thing I called me, that is a conditioned manufacturing of my mind. I choose to see me as an individual, selective self, unlike everything outside the self. And that's the primary illusion of this process of instantiating to be, is me, right? But in Buddhism, we want to take that apart. We want to realize that me-ness, that self, is a constructed thing. That to understand all of life and the opportunity that this samsaric life presents is to stop thinking of this unit of self and start to recognize the process that this momentary instantiation of the idea of self is just here to support a mind that sees clearly, well outside of that narrow identification of self. So here we go again. Thus he lives contemplating the body internal, the body external, the body internal and external, right? The formations of this body, and clings not in this world. So get unstuck from this idea of individual self. Let it go. Don't cling to it in this world. This world being this expression of all things, all phenomena. There would be a better word to use than world, right? Thus, O bhikkhus, a bhikkhu lives contemplating the body in the body. In other words, how'd you get here? Cemetery contemplation number 2. And further, O bhikkhus, if a bhikkhu in whatever way sees, whilst it is being eaten by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, jackals, or by different kinds of worms, a body that had been thrown into the carnal ground, he thinks of his own body thus, quote, "This body of mine, too, is of the same nature as that body, is going to be like that body, and has not got past the condition of becoming like that body." Non-got past of the condition of becoming like that body. In other words, we maintain our samsaric existence, right? So, being in this samsaric existence, being in this body that continues as this physical, mechanical thing, this body that we continue to identify with as self and I, mine, it's made of all this viscera, all these different material aspects, and there it is, dead, being eaten by crows and so forth, rotting. Well, that's basically what I've been identifying with this whole time. Why am I still hanging on to that stuff? It's obviously not me, not my consciousness. It's a mechanical thing of different natures, nature's physical, material, not nature's tendencies and conditions of the mind, right? What we're confronting in the cemetery is, oh yeah, this body identification, this idea of me. Look at it. It's flawed. It's wrong. Because whatever that person was identified as, Mary, John, Pradeep, he, she, no longer there. Yet the body is there, rotting, being eaten. Yeah. Should sever this connection between identification and the materiality its only purpose is to instantiate that identification. That's the mind. It's not the body that's making that identification. It's just a mechanical thing. Thus he lives contemplating the body and the body internal, or he lives contemplating the body and the body external, or he lives contemplating the body and the body internal and external. He lives contemplating origination things, formations of things in the body, or he lives contemplating dissolution things in the body, or he lives contemplating origination and dissolution things in the body, or indeed his mindfulness is established with the thought, quote, "The body exists to the extent necessary just for knowledge and remembrance, and he lives independent and clings not in the world." There's the whole enchilada. Once you understand with mindfulness that all of this drama of the mechanisms to support conscious mind, I shouldn't mix those two because consciousnesses are divided into 9 different realms in Buddhism. So this is a samsaric consciousness, a samsaric consciousness that he describes as this body exists solely for the purpose, he says it right here, to the extent necessary, just to the extent necessary, just for knowledge, knowing, perceiving, and remembrance. Remembrance of what? Not past lives, he would have said that. Remembrance of the energies, the momentum, the kinetics that came to instantiate this moment. That's remembrance. And he lives independent. The mind is what is living and clings to not in the world. He clings to nothing in this world, clings to not this in this world. But it doesn't say clings to not body, right? Because the body exists. He's saying your body exists. But its purpose is for reckoning, for perceiving with the mind this moment and the process of life that led to this moment, this machinery of allowing you to have the Buddha eye, the eye of experience, untied, unfettered to the experience of this body, which includes everything around you. So in that aspect, body external is the influence the body has and the influences coming into the body from one's environment. But it's still the body. Cemetery contemplation number 3. And further, O bhikkhus, if a bhikkhu in whatever way sees a body thrown into the carnal ground and reduced to a skeleton, together with some flesh and blood held in by the tendons, he thinks of his own body thus: this body of mine too is of the same nature as that body, is going to be like that body, and has not got past the condition of becoming like that body. The condition of being alive is a duration event. The instantiate, right? We've gone over this. Energies, momentum, kinetics brings you into the womb, and you mix then with the intentions and influences of the two parents that instantiates your material existence. You thus are born into this world, so you arise through that process. Your arising doesn't begin in the womb. It begins when the process, the inertia, the momentum of your tendencies and conditions finds a suitable womb to express itself. From the womb to death is an expression of your tendencies and conditions. And this life is an expression of those tendencies and conditions from a very self-motivated perspective. And that self-motivated perspective, which is inculcated into us from previous humans, and our own desire to be, stay, make permanent, is the cause of our suffering, is the cause of our stress and our anxiety. So it follows then, if we can disconnect from that huge engine of being and tying it, attaching it to this body and what is around this body, if we can just disconnect from that, we can be free to experience the magnificence of this whole process, unencumbered by self. Or maybe another way to say it is to see oneself as all phenomena. There's no difference. But of course, now it becomes a tripwire. Because now, as we analyze the cemetery and the conditions of the body, and we understand that we haven't, what are the words here? Or the same nature as the body, is going to be like that body and has not got past the condition of becoming that body. In other words, we're not there yet. We're not rotting yet. The idea might be that it's only after you're done rotting that you can be completely free of this body and then think clearly like Buddha. That's a tripwire, and that's not what he's saying. But you could understand if you were talking, like today, if you were talking to a 6-year-old about this process, they might get the idea. Why would they get that idea? Why would you, with all of this repetition and teaching and dissection, literally, of the condition of samsara, would you then start to invest into an afterlife, another life, or something after you're through with this body? If you miss the idea that Buddha is trying to teach here, as Shakyamuni is saying, right now, let go of your attachment to this thing and free your mind to think outside of this thing, observe this thing as one of incalculable phenomena, to observe this amazing experience of what life in the universe itself is. With that mind, with that perspective, look at your friends, neighbors, yourself as simply these little functions of life. That's amazing. And wherever there's attachment to that, that precipitates anxiety or stress, oh man, you don't need to do that. Just look at how amazing everything is. Even yourself, quote unquote. Don't get rid of it. Just understand that's not what's important here. Right? You want to help out. No, get out of the muck. Look. Right? But it's easy to miss that point, even though it's been driven at so hard. Why? I hate that question, but I'm sure you're asking yourself, why would I continue to think that I only achieve Buddhahood after I'm through with this body? You're not wrong in saying that, but your time component to it is wrong. Not saying you specifically, I'm saying to the person who thinks that Buddhahood is only attainable in some other than this life. See, that very statement is contradictory, because this life is its life. There is no this life and that life. This is it. All of it. But we're so clinging to stuff. This body, this earth, this other, this self. That enlightenment seems like, if it's not this, then it must be somewhere else. That's how brainwashed we are with ourselves as the center of the universe, if you will. Like there can be no universe without this self. No. Shakyamuni is dissecting the crap out of this body to try to get you to, and this is where we will get to the repulsion, right? Be repulsed by your body. In other words, that's a contemporaneous perception. Understand that your body is not where it's at. That it just supports. See, in that way, the body is very important. It's talked about here, but it's a difficult argument to come to terms with words. And the key for me is where he talks about a monk contemplating the origination things in the body and the dissolution things in the body. If you understand the formations of the body, and then it continues, just for knowledge and remembrance, that's what the body exists for. The body doesn't know or remember, it's the mind that knows and remembers. And he lives independent, in other words, free of the body, and clings to naught in this world. In other words, the mind freed from the anxiety, stresses, and so forth, that clinging to body, the idea of body, which infers everything other than the body as well, as real, and instead understands that its purpose, its exalted purpose, is for the perception of real reality, not clinging to this body, then he clings to naught in the world. In other words, he has nothing to cling to. If you sever your avarice for this body, your greed, your attachment to body, self, and other, because the two are the same, then you're free to have knowledge and remembrance and observation of life itself. And you're no longer held back or influenced by the foibles of self and other. Those things are where suffering comes from. Stress, anxiety, blah, blah, blah. Contemplation 4. And further, O monks, O bhikkhu, in whatever way sees a body thrown in the carnal ground and reduced to a blood-besmeared skeleton without flesh, but held in by the tendons, he thinks of his own body thus: this body of mine, too, is of the same nature as that body, is going to be like that body, and has not got past the condition of becoming like that body. And my samsaric arising, duration, and decay, I'm still in it. I haven't got rid of this body, and that's where it's going to end up. If you could see it as a separate thing from your mind, that is what is being described here, or attempted to arise that mind of perception, free of the idea of body and other. Thus he lives contemplating the body, internal, external, internal and external, the origination, the formations of this body, why the formations, why the body exists out of these formations, what's going on here. Oh yeah, it's for my mind to perceive clearly this huge process called life, to perceive the reality of reality, the process of life. How amazing that is. What a wonder to appreciate without the defilements of being body and other. Thus, O bhikshus, bhikkhu, lives contemplating the body and the body. This is how you should live in the body that you have, understanding all the while that it's a provisional thing for you to experience something far in excess of the boundaries of this thing, this mechanism that you're walking through life with. And theirs, and that, and the tree, and the mountain. It's all wonderfully manifest of this kinetics and momentum of perception, to be. Just witness everything being, rather than being connected to it. Be an observer of it. Contemplation 5, he's not done. Further, bhikkhu, in whatever way, sees a body thrown in the carnal ground and reduced to a skeleton held in by tendons, but without flesh, and not besmeared by blood. He thinks of his own body thus: this body of mine too is the same nature, so on and so forth. Number 6, and further, if a monk in whatever way sees a body thrown in the carnal ground and reduced to bones gone loose, scattered in all directions. It's not even a skeleton anymore, it's just a collection of bones. A bone of the hand, a bone of the foot, a shin bone, a thigh bone, a pelvis, spine, skull, each in a different place. He thinks of his own body: this body of mine too is of the same nature as that body, is going to be like that body, and has not got past the condition of becoming like that body. You notice he never says being that body. It's becoming. I'm in a process. I'm in a duration. And I will decay eventually just like that body. But I'm not there yet. I'm not gone past the condition, right, of being. Thus he contemplates his body internally, externally, and externally, and so on and so forth. Formations, always the formations. The coming into being, the duration, the decay, and the dissolution, the dissolving. This is very early teachings, and it's very, very on point if you understand, as we easily do, from our modern perspective, what he's pointing at here. The seventh contemplation, same thing, bones white in color like conch. He thinks of his own, but the bleached bones scattered about. Number 8, sees the carnal ground reduce the bones more than a year old, heaped together. He thinks of his own body thus, so you scoop up the bones, white, bleached, broken, whatever. Just like me, I'm just not there yet. Number 9, reduced to bones, gone rotten, and become dust. He thinks of his own body thus. Once again, not going to read through the whole thing, you get it by now. Again, understanding that the body is just a provisional thing, not something to be held onto, to be held precious, to be held in relation to. That it's just a facility to be able to perceive. Right? The contemplation of feeling is the next chapter. Where are we time-wise here? Well, I've gone on and on. Well, we'll have to keep this for tomorrow. But now I wonder how he's going to dissect feeling, and then the contemplation of consciousness. So we'll get to that before Sunday's Gongyo when we shift to a new sutra. But I hope this has some little signifiers in it, something of an aha as you go through it. I know it's repetitive, but it bears study, because even the repetitiveness of it, sometimes you got to hear something 10 different ways before your experience in your mind suddenly goes, wait, that's new. Well, it's not. It's just a different way of saying the same thing. But to your experience, it's new. And suddenly, the rest of it all takes on a new shape. Isn't that how we learn? It's a strange thing. But you could actually, in thinking about this, that those aha moments, those moments of insight, whenever we get them, about whatever we get them, is kind of a wrestling match in our human mind, in our samsaric mind, between the attachment of ideas that constantly manipulate us, even without knowing, and that moment of insight, that aha. It always feels like a cellular resonance, doesn't it? It's like, I don't even know what's happening right now, but something's totally new. Right? Those kinds of insights, those kinds of aha moments. And then it's like waterfalls of understanding. Some of them come at you so fast, they come and they go, and you look for them because you knew there was something of value there, but now you're focusing on this one. You're in that miasm of clarity, and the wrestling of that clarity amongst this huge pressure of making permanent being, want to be, want to self, I, mine, is fighting tooth and nail to keep you away from that insight that explains all this other crud that's in your way. But once you get that insight, it becomes a super powerful tool, doesn't it? Wow, that changed my life. Wow, I see things differently. Wow, I want to dig deeper into that. And you go down another rabbit hole, right? But don't forget when you get those insights, they're powerful things. I would even say take that to your mandala. Try to stay there. The more you stay in that insight, without words, without definitions, that insight moment is your Buddha. Hold on to it. Expand it. And you will know without having to know. Do you see what I mean there? Knowledge, as he's trying to explain to his monks here, is not a definition, a distinction. Oh, now I see that that is not this and this is not that. No, you don't. You're taking that knowledge and you're gluing it to stuff. Samsara. Knowledge is experience. Experience that fully. When you jump into a pool and you swim, you don't think of every little molecule of water that you're moving around. You may, but that's attachment. You just perceive the fluidity and you move through it, and you know you need air, and so you distinguish air from water. You could argue that's the samsaric border there, right? That's preserving the body. But do you preserve the body to have the body, or do you preserve the body so you continue to experience swimming? See, knowledge is tricky, that word. Knowledge, Buddha knowledge, Buddha experience is unfettered, unattached. That makes sense? I hope so. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, participating. Remember, these are all available as podcast oral downloads. Hey, what you doing? Got my little dog with me. She's my little cuddle monster. Okay, speaking of cuddle monsters, you guys are amazing. I'm so proud of you. Myoho Renge Kyo. Keep up your practice. Take care of your health. Be kind to yourself and others. That kindness is kindness to others and self at the same time. Thank you for your support. It's invaluable. Please do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, support, share. And we'll continue with the Satipatthana tomorrow. I hope to see you there. I expect to see you there. And I will see you then. Bye.